Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Go down, go down, go down, go down.
Here when this guy got killed in Scott Hall, Willie Grimes.
Wow.
We were here.
Wow.
We heard all the bullets being shot at Scott Hall. We were in the dormitory over there on the floor. When the National Guards came on this campus, we were here.
Totally home.
I'm curious, just as a student on the campus, what was that experience like when, you have the government coming in? Like, did that make anything kind of like anxious or just like, moving around campus, everybody felt uncomfortable?
I was afraid. We were afraid. I was really afraid that, we were going to get shot because we could hear the bullets. We could hear, we were getting down on the floor in the room because I thought the bullets were going to come over there where we were. I was really afraid. That's what like this.
No.
And I think also disappointed after we got through all of the bullets and all that we weren't going to graduate.
Right, we had to leave campus.
We
were graduating in '69. Everybody had to leave campus immediately.
But they didn't leave me either.
But they said it.
Some of us was trying to get out of there. I said, how am I going? It hadn't been for them. I don't know where I would have been.
My brother had to come from Virginia to get me. My mother lives in South Carolina. And she said, well, call your brother. He has to come and get you. So he came from Danville, came down, picked me up. And I took all my things. I had to take to his house. We had to leave and take all our belongings with us.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, wow.
That was something. That was an experience like you've never had. We really enjoyed our college time here, but that was an experience that we'll never forget.
Hello, my name is Daniel Claiborne. The opening of this documentary contained many clips from my homecoming, from my alma mater, North Carolina Agricultural Technical State University. Homecoming has always been a moment of clarity, reflection, and emphasizing Black joy and creating a safe space for allowing us just to be our full human selves. Ultimately, these institutions were built to bring educational opportunities at a time where segregation kept us from going to other institutions that did not want us to be there. In many of the clips of the introduction, I kind of use that as the framing for this documentary. I hope that you can see the juxtaposition between Black joy, Black happiness, the fears, the anxieties, the love and the care that we show not just towards ourselves, but to the greater community around us. How African Americans express their loyalty, their pride, their love, their hurt, their pain, and all the things that allow us to feel human. And with that paradigm in mind, I want to take that framing and ask a question of, what is the promised land to the African American experience? It was used as a biblical allegory for the hope and the dream to escape bondage. In the context of this film, I now want to apply that framing of what is the promised land and what it could look like for African Americans in healthcare.
So what is oral history? Oral history means many different things to many different people. But academics have defined oral history since the late 1940s as a research method that asks eyewitnesses to talk about their lives and their own experiences in usually very extensive life history interviews or event-focused interviews.
The oral tradition in the African American context has always been a way in which we pass down knowledge from an ancestral place to the next generation in the hopes that they would keep the lessons of the past and use that to guide them to a better future. These histories vary differently across the diaspora due to the transatlantic slave trade. The oral histories of Jamaica and how they experienced slavery in the sugarcane fields is different than the oral history than the African Americans who experienced slavery here in the Americas. But these histories all have the ability to show us a difference between our ethnicities and also remind us of where our traditions are rooted in, because they are carried on as legacies that inherently represent us. The stories we tell ourselves shows how we frame looking within. The stories others tell about us gives us insight on how we're viewed outside of our community. These unique narratives play a role in shaping how we interact with others and how they interact with us. That's why it's vitally important for these narratives to be rooted in authenticity. Where there's authenticity, there can be intention, there can be reciprocal communication. And when recording the information of a person of a specific ethnicity or background, it's important to highlight the context of the lived experiences of those individuals, especially in areas of healthcare where there has been a dehumanization. How you capture that context directly impacts how you will interact with that community. When a narrative is not fully understood or other values are projected onto that narrative outside of its authenticity, interpretations and nuances will be missed. And that creates a separation and connection that does not allow for all parties to come together and to feel heard. My particular heritage is of an African American father and an Afro-Caribbean mother. And as I've learned from them, I understand that although there are parallel experiences through bondage throughout the diaspora, it's very much important to understand how those differences in experiences impact how we view care and how we view health and wellness. From the slaves from West Africa to the indigenous Caribbean populations, and highlight unique traditions. These type of narratives are often expressed in art forms, seen in music, poetry, dancing. I want to say solidified ways in which we express our human experiences. There's a story behind every expression, and there's a people behind every story. Public health interventions want to connect with the people. You must make sure that you understand the story. That requires observing the oral traditions from the perception of those who are telling their story. And it provides a unique opportunity for healthcare and preventative interventions to be more tailored to communities who want care but don't have the trust in the system to receive that care. It's important to look beneath the stereotypes to make sure that you get a clear picture. I'm a huge fan of hip hop. It is one of the purest forms of oral history, and it's rooted deep within a multi-ethnic combination of arts, words and sounds, poetry and motion. It was created by marginalized youth from the ghetto. It tells stories through percussion, cadence, dance influences. It is also a culturally vital tool that has been used to communicate lessons and values. One of my favorite hip hop classics is from a group called Ghetto Boys, called My Mind Is Playing Tricks on Me. It made it to the #1 Billboard song of that year. But also, that song is a psychosis and schizophrenia anthem. The orator Scarface describes how it feels to flow in and out of lucidity from a mental health episode. Moments of clarity, knowing that what you're experiencing with this hallucination is not real, but still, it presents itself as a liability to your well-being. And traditional diagnostic terms don't need to be used for them to express that they need help. If you take the time and the insight to understand how the music is communicating a public health need, there's an opportunity for growth and new systems of learning for all parties to build a better, healthier community.
All right, hello. My name is Carolyn Gaddy. I've worked for Cato Warehouse for 7 years and just recently retired last year in February, which now I am doing retirement, and this is just something to do to, to keep myself moving. I just feel like it's time for me to slow down and do something a little easier, a little bit more slower pace. I think longevity, if you want to, I know God is in control, but you also, he says if you make one step, he'll make two. So you gotta, keep yourself in good health by trying to do the things that will keep you alive, and for the most part. And so that it is very important to me, especially when I've gotten, I do wish that I could have came to this realization before now, but nevertheless it's still just as important, just to wherever you began, at whatever age you began. But I think it's very important that now that I'm at the age of 65, I think it is relevant for me to keep moving and try to take care of my body, and along with my mind, and hopefully my mind will follow. When I go and see the doctor, well, that's another thing that I've deleted really from trying to go to the doctors here lately. Because when I go, I feel like they don't listen to me. I'm in a hurry. I'm rush, and it's like I'm on a time frame. And so I'm getting to think or to believe that when I go, it's like they're not really concerned, or maybe not saying concern would be the correct word, but I just don't feel like I'm important like, back in the day. It just seems like it's just more of a money thing now. And what I've learned, or I've started to take notice and remember, that back in the day, the ancestors, they didn't have medicine, and they didn't have anything to keep them well, or to help them to help them in their health journey. So they would often use herbs and the earth for helping them to heal. And so I'm trying kind of sort of getting back to that. Yes, I've been trying a number of things with friends, networking with a lot of people, suggesting a lot of things, a lot of herbs I've tried that has really helped. I am doing now bitters, like sour sop bitters, black seed bitters, sea moss bitters.
Okay.
And I've noticed that, it really helps. I do think it's important to know and keep stable as far as your mind, and knowing that God is in control, but also knowing that that you should rely on Him. Well, for one, when I mention that, they always say that that's not a good thing, or you can't mix that with your medications. It's always something to deter me from using the medicine that they would prescribe or give me. It's never a good thing that they want to hear, of course. I found that out. So, you know, and I feel like that's a bad thing that I get from them. The good thing about it is that you have to, with anything, you have to read up on stuff. You know, you just can't get anything or whatever, even if it's from the doctor, you know, no matter what they say, because they'll tell you something that's, you know, that because they want you, they'll push that medication on you and, you know, tell you this is what you need. But, you know, like so many times I've gotten medication, was prescribed medications, and I later on realized or read my pamphlet and said, oh my God, this has 15 side effects. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm taking. So many medications I've been prescribed and I've pushed aside, and, you know, still have them in my drawer, and I should throw them away because I don't take it.
The idea of a good death initially is one that was synonymous with euthanasia, but as time went on, the focus shifted solely from euthanasia to what patients consider important at the end of their respective lives. Dying with dignity, being able to say goodbye, life completion, and preparation for death, some of the many components that are considered when people think of the topic of a good death. Because this topic still has no clear definition, there's still a wide range of debate considering what actually is considered a good death, and that kind of also depends on the person's perspective. Black death is something that feels uniquely politicized and dehumanized. We have watched the deaths of Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, George Floyd, and countless others go viral while people use their death as political talking points. And I think that goes into the next point about desecration. So desecration is defined as to violate the sanctity of something. But now in this digital age, we also see digital desecration of individuals' memories. George Floyd, he was killed in a brutal and brazen act of police brutality that sparked nationwide protests. It also led to a lot of jokes, memes, and conspiracy theories regarding his death. Even though his body is in the ground, his memory continues to be desecrated. This has a real effect on the loved ones. And next example I want to talk about is Eric Garner. She's the daughter of Eric Garner, and she got thrust into the spotlight following the brutal killing of her dad, Eric Garner. Almost immediately, she was heavily involved in activism, and her grief powered her fight for justice. At age 27, 3 years after her dad died, she died of a second heart attack. It appears that she was going through complicated grief, a type of grief that worsens over time. The stress of losing her dad, her activism, having her son, and PTSD all had a negative impact on her health and ultimately contributed to her death. A good death for me doesn't involve my death becoming a political talking point or memes for someone's twisted form of enjoyment. It's one where my dignity and personhood are intact. One where my identity isn't solely tied to what ended my life, but rather the life that I actually lived.
My name is Shelly. I'm a mother of 3 and a wife. Moved here about 20 years ago into the city of Charlotte from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And since I've been here, I consistently try to continuously do community outreach and help others, as well as help take care of my son that is disabled and my grandchildren. In 2020, my daughter decided she couldn't see people living in tents and living the way that they were living, and she wanted to go out and feed them. So we began a nonprofit called Pressing Forward. And what we do is we go out and we feed those that are less fortunate, and we give them gently used and new clothing. Making sound decisions that allow you to be productive amongst society, as well as being able to determine what's healthy for you, setting boundaries that are healthy for you, because a lot of people don't understand that boundaries are for you, not for the other. But not allowing people to make you sacrifice your peace. okay, that helps you to relieve stress from your life. Well, I've been there. I have, been displaced before. I remember a couple of nights I slept in my car, and that doesn't help with your mental health. As far as your mental health goes, you're always, in order for you to be able to stop the wheels from turning, you need to be able to know what your next is. And if you don't know where you're going to lay your head at, are you going to have to sleep outside? Are you going to have food for the next meal or whatever? That becomes stressful. So I feel like if you can't, as far as housing goes, if they're not able to, let's say, know where they're going to live at, mentally, they're destroyed.
Yeah.
You're destroyed. That's it. Everyone wants to know that they're not homeless. Yes, they may have had situations that created, the homelessness, but to know that there are resources that they can't put their hands on, or they're constantly turned down for the help, it makes them feel like my mental's gone.
Right.
I don't know what's next. I don't know what to do next. I don't know how I'm going to make it next. If I go to the hospital and I say I need assistance, they're going to assist me. I find that that's not more so a mental thing for me, because I know that they are going to assist me. But I do see people when they're at the hospital, and the moment that they say I'm homeless, I have nowhere to go, or they're not too quick to want to help them, and I feel like that's not good, and it's unhealthy for the system to be that way, because a lot of these people need help. They need help, and I believe that if they had someone that could help them find the resources, locate the resources that they need, it would help them with their mental health. I remember years ago seeing a young lady that the day I saw her, she had a lot of different mental health issues, and she, I think she had like personality disorder and things like that. But I happened to run into her a couple of years later, and she was perfectly fine. But she had also obtained housing. So, and it took for her to go through several agencies to be able to obtain that housing, and I feel like if one agency has the ability to help, you shouldn't give them the runaround to go here, go there, do this, do that. Someone should hear the people's pain. Watching how I've seen various people treated in the hospital system has created a fear of the hospital system for me. It took me a long time. I just recently found out I had some health issues, and it took me a long time to find out about those health issues because of the fact that I fear hospitals. I fear that if I go to the hospital, the doctor is not going to care for me properly. And a lot of it is because I feel like as a Black woman, they're not going to care for me properly. And so when I go in there, they're going to just simply say, oh, it's this, it's this, it's that, and never really do the test that's needed to get to the root of the problem. So that makes me not want to go to the hospital. I fear that if I go, they're not going to care enough, and I'm going to end up dying in that hospital. So it took me a long time to, remotely get anywhere close to getting past that fear. And I think I just started getting past that fear because my health was getting worse. Because I had a sister who passed away from being addicted to opioids. And so I'm not one to really take medicine after, that happened to her. I'd rather holistically treat. If you tell me I need to change my eating habits, I I need to leave this alone, I need to leave that alone. I'd rather do that opposed to going to the doctors and they're saying, you need to take 100 milligrams of this every day. I don't want to do that.
Right.
I don't want to do that. I don't want anything in my system that can be addictive. In 2021, I had a gallbladder issue, and when I was told that there's no way to get rid of gallstones without performing surgery and taking the gallbladder. A young lady that I worked with, she holistically treated her father who had the same issue, and she ordered me a natural vitamin that I took, and that natural vitamin it softened the gallstones, and I threw those up. And when I took them back to Novant Health, I wanted to see that doctor specifically, but of course he's an ER doctor, you couldn't see him again. And I asked to speak to that doctor and I couldn't speak to him, but I wanted him to see that what he said was a false statement and that the gallstones were removed. So when they did the ultrasound, the gallstones were gone.
It's I don't know if I'm gonna keep this last part in, but it's kind of like a personal testament to myself. Since I struggle with bipolar disorder, there's certain substances I know I can't put in my body. And there was a time when I talked to a doctor after, you know, having some symptoms that might require pain management, and he gave me a hydrocodone. And I immediately felt my mood begin to shift, and I had to tell my family members, get out the room. And then for the next 6 weeks, I had one of the most unstable episodes of my life. To be honest, my grandfather's hunting knife was calling out to me, and I reached out to it and then realized what I was doing, immediately left the house. So that was a potentially life-threatening situation that could have happened. So what I put in my charts going forward was allergic to opioids. So I ended up going to the hospital again for pain management, and not only while I was in immense amount of pain did the people think that I was essentially just seeking out drugs. I had passed out in the waiting room, and the nurse had said like, oh, I've never seen this one before. Here's an example of a terrible public health intervention. There's a company called StarMed Urgent Care that once visited my neighborhood. They set up their bus and everything, delivering small clinical services and helping people sign up for health insurance at 7:30 a.m. and left by 4:30 p.m. And the question becomes, who are you trying to reach? If you know the dynamics of the community that you're dealing with, you know people are already going into work and they're dropping their kids off. And there's no guarantee that they would be back home before 5, because a lot of these people who are in economically divested areas have to work multiple jobs. People getting home from 3rd shifts. If they cared about impact, they would have done the research. It's important to see how a community can be a multifaceted, just almost living organism. While some people may just see corner stores with an egregious amount of tobacco products, pawn shops, an obnoxious amount of gas stations, not enough grocery stores, payday loans, rec centers, hair salons, barbershops, and the most delicious sesame seed chicken you've ever had in your life. And it's important to see how all these things act as community focal points where you can better understand how those individuals you're trying to reach interact with their daily surroundings and the narratives that they create to continue habits and patterns that allow them to survive in these spaces. I want to say thank you for the time you took to look into this documentary, and I hope that you hear those who are sharing their stories, from healthcare workers to housing activists to grandmothers who are looking to just take care of themselves so that they can show up for their grandchildren.